Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Q&A Social Security Disability Today. I am your host, Attorney Anthony Reeves, and as always, it's a pleasure to have you. As always, I appreciate the good questions that you have coming. Keep them coming, and you can send them to a variety of sources. You can go to legalbeat.anthonyreeves.com. That's my blog. You can always post comments there. Of course, it's great to leave them here, but you can always check me out at my law firm site, which is www.reevesfirm.com. So there's plenty of places for you to shoot me messages, whether it be at anthony@reevesfirm.com. You can send me a message directly on Facebook if you go through my fan page. It's always helpful, which is Reeves Law Firm. So pick your social media site, whichever one you want to go to, and keep the questions coming. I really appreciate it. Now, we got three questions today, so I want to jump on them because a couple of them are fairly detailed. The first one is asking about Social Security fraud. About Social Security fraud, my question is what's the punishment when the Social Security or the FBI catches these fakes? Do they get 5 years in prison, or do they make them pay the government back? Is the punishment severe? Okay, let's start with one basic premise. When you're talking about Social Security fraud, you can't really put it all in one nice lump sum. It depends on the type of fraud. Meaning, are we talking identity theft? Are we talking situation where the person is applying for Social Security disability benefits and they're fraudulent in how they're going about getting those benefits? Or maybe they got the benefits and they have been fraudulent in terms of letting the government know about their conditions. There's a different there's a standard is pretty much similar for each one, but you have to really look at it in terms of what specifically are you talking about. Keep in mind a couple of things. There's a lot of agencies that have an impact on fraud as it relates to Social Security. Let me give you a couple. First and foremost, if you think someone is committing fraud against Social Security, contact Social Security directly because they have an Office of Inspector General that actually investigates fraud. Now, if you think somebody is using your Social Security number, here's a couple of sources that you need to keep in mind. One, the Federal Trade Commission is responsible for handling identity theft. So that's one place you need to think about. Also, you should file an online complaint with the Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is www.ic3.gov. It should be listed here in my notes here, so you should be able to see it. And because they're the one-stop shop and they're the central mechanism for complaints involving internet-related crimes. So if somebody's using your Social Security number to get credit or do different things, then of course cybercrimes comes into play. And then there's a number of agencies that they work with. They work with the FBI, the National White Collar Crime Center, and the Bureau of Justice Assistance. So you've got a number of different sources that take responsibility as well as some local level. But remember, when you're dealing with Social Security, this is a federal issue. So most of your assets or most of your law enforcement agencies that are going to be handling this are going to be at the federal level. Now, from a penalty standpoint, a couple of things come into play. First, thank you for the question, but that is true. Under the law, there are two types of penalties that you can get. You can get up to 5 years, or you can get a fine. To make sure I got my thing correctly here as I'm reviewing this. Yep, under the United States Code, the person can be in prison for no more than 5 years, fined, or both. Now, since the person asked the question about whether the person can get paid, asked to give the money back, that happens too. Like it's in Social Security context, if they determine that you committed fraud and that they overpaid you as a result of this, they can ask for restitution, i.e., they can make you pay the money back. So you can look at a possible fine, prison time, and having to do what we call restitution, where you're basically reimbursing the government the money. So all those things come into play. But the biggest thing that I always tell people is if you think if from a Social Security standpoint that from disability and applying for benefits, if you think a fraud is being committed, you contact Social Security directly. If it's an identity theft issue, you need to contact the Federal Trade Commission or go to www.ic3.gov, and that's a good starting place to kind of put the appropriate individuals online to know that somebody's using your Social Security number, which is a federal number, for illegal purposes. So that's the first question. Hope that addressed it. If you need me to go into more detail, I'll be more than happy to do so. Second question. I have a question about my case. I've been off drugs and alcohol for 3 years. Congratulations. I have anxiety and panic disorder, depression, and asthma. I've had multiple hospital ER visits due to my anxiety and panic disorder. Now, here's where it gets tough. I've been found to have drugs in my system once in the emergency room visits where I had a relapse. That sometimes happens. That's unfortunate, but hopefully that didn't keep you off too much. I went to a hearing and it was brought up in the hearing. I told them that I've been clean and sober for over a year and go to AA meetings. What do you think my chances are? It's a wonderful question because there is a standard. Let me give you a little historical perspective. I believe back in the mid 90s, there was a period of time where people could get disability benefits based on drugs and alcohol. Social Security changed that, and in their wisdom recognized that they did not want to provide financial compensation and disability benefits to those people who were addicted to drugs or alcohol. So what they did was they changed it, and now we have what's called a drug and alcohol materiality standard. Now, the long and short of that is what came first, the chicken or the egg? Does the drugs and alcohol have a bearing on your disability, or does your disability have a bearing on the drugs and alcohol? I know that's kind of a funky way of saying it, but the nice way of saying this: if we get rid of the drugs and alcohol, are you still disabled? That's really the ultimate question. So that when those periods of sobriety, if you're still severe, then in most instances, courts will make a determination that the drugs and alcohol are not material to a finding of disability. So typically what they do first they determine, are you disabled? So they go through the 5-step process. They determine if you're disabled first. Then they go to the second step, which involves the DNA standard, which is, all right, is the person using drugs and or alcohol? If the answer is yes, then you must ask, is it material to a finding of disability? Meaning, we know the person is disabled, but if we take the drugs and alcohol away, are they still disabled? If they're not, then what happens is it is determined that the drugs and alcohol are material to your disability, meaning you're only disabled when you're doing the drugs and alcohol. Once you're not doing them, then you're straight. For purposes of the question asked, really the best thing to do is to look at the periods of sobriety. In other words, if you had, like he said, he or she, I don't know if it was a he or she, so please forgive me. If in their question they said that 3 years ago they stopped, and let's say for 2 years they were clean, and they had medical treatment during those 2 years to demonstrate they were clean, 2 years of ongoing, getting the treatment, going to the doctors, and they were still having severe problems, and then had a brief relapse, but then got clean again, then what will probably happen, and what the courts typically do, is they look at that period of sobriety, because that is their best reference to see if your condition is still severe when you were clean. Let me tell you where it becomes a nightmare: when there is no period of sobriety, meaning the person is on for a month or two, they relapse, and then they back off again, and they relapse, and it's like it's so overlapped that you can't tell where the sobriety is because there is no clear-cut period of sobriety. One of the things a lot of reps that I talk to, and I do as well, we tell people, the longer the period of sobriety you have, the better reference you can provide to the court of how your condition was when you were sober. So, to answer your question, they'll look to that period of sobriety. If they think you're significant or you're significantly impacted during that period when you were clean, that's what they're going to base their decision on. All right, here's my final question. Final question really has to do with, I was denied. My lawyer said I was getting a letter in 2 weeks from Social Security office. It's been 2 months and nothing. Called Social Security. 3 or 4 people told me over a period of 2 days that I've been approved by the reconsideration examiner. Now it's in the quality review board. Is this good or bad? What does this mean? Okay. Social Security has a variety of safeguards that they have in place to ensure that proper decisions are made. What happens is at the initial level, let's say this is what it sounds like it happened. You got denied at the initial level. Then at the reconsideration level, you were approved. Now, what happens is the quality review board, probably took that decision because they are probably going to review the case to see what happened between that initial denial and that approval, where the Social Security Administration at that level determined that they needed to change their decision. Because remember, it stays at the local office. So the first 6 months they had your case, somebody said, or let's just say 6, I'm just throwing a number. The first 6 months they had your case, you were denied. Now, the next time they reviewed your case to take another look at it, somebody changed their mind. So they tend to take those situations seriously. What does it mean to you? You won't know until you get a decision. I know that sucks to hear that, but really, the reality is they want to see what did the office rely on the second time around that made them change their mind. Was that available to them the first time around? If it was, why did that initial person say no, but now the second person says yes? So what they're doing is they're trying to determine whether or not which decision is the proper decision. Now, for your purposes, we're hoping it's the one that approves you, but that's why they're sending it up there, just to ensure that the proper decision is made. It doesn't mean anything good, doesn't mean anything bad. They're just trying to ensure that a proper decision was made in this instance. Again, as always, I appreciate you asking me questions. Keep them coming. As I indicated before, I've had at least a couple of questions about drugs and alcohol, heart conditions. If you have any particular condition that you'd like for me to talk about in detail in terms of what representatives or persons like myself look for to determine whether we think it's severe and things like that, keep the questions coming. I welcome them, I value them, and I appreciate them. As always, just to let you know, I put different topics on my blog. So typically what I cover here, I don't cover there. So please feel free to subscribe to my blog or just go and review and peruse through the different ones I've done in the past. I've been doing this for a number of years, so hopefully there's some information that you can use that's helpful to you. And as always, if you want me to discuss any topic in greater detail, because today I usually spend my days answering questions, I can always dedicate it. Just make sure you send me a message and you put in the title, dedicated video. And that lets me know that you want a video that's separate and apart from me answering questions today. As always, it's a pleasure. Have a wonderful weekend, a wonderful week, and I enjoy you being here. Take care.